If I was sitting on the bench, I would make him. He would find out. Like, this would be the true clash of our Constitution. If it's anybody else, if there's nobody that's above the law, then why is it that he's acting like it? And it's because you're allowing him to. If you would lock me up or anybody else up for violating court orders and doing these things, then lock him up. Or lock his minions, lock whoever up who has to be locked up, and not because it's political, because that's the thing. They always try to make it seem like, well, he's the victim and it's political. No, it's not. He's a criminal and he's a thug.
During an interview with comedian and former Daily Show correspondent Hasan Minhaj, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett highlighted one of the most fundamental factors that has allowed Trump to be in the position he's in now: a criminal level of entitlement.
Imagine this being the guy telling the immigrants that they are the ones that are causing the crime and wreaking the havoc.
Yeah, we can't have criminals in this country.
Yeah.
Right.
And they are the ones messing up. No, let me tell you who's messing up our cities and our economy. It's him. Him and his rogue administration.
Crockett, as usual, is spot on here. Trump and his inner circle of allies are only concerned with consolidating and concentrating as much power as possible within the presidency so they can serve the interests of the ultra-rich ruling class. And when you have a judicial system that has been captured by right-wing institutions like the Federalist Society and Heritage Foundation, and a Congress completely bought and sold by corporations, foreign nations, and other special interest groups, why would Trump and everyone else in power feel like they have to be held accountable for anything they do? We all know this. Money and political power are inextricably linked together in today's political system in America, because you have all these corporations, you have these super PACs that donate to Democrats and Republicans, and essentially they're bought. Right? These congressmen, congresswomen, the political party, or like the president, because you can have, like Elon Musk, for example, great example, buy his way into the president's office, where he's sitting down and having access to very sensitive information. What? That's scary, but that's part of it, right? Where you can just buy your way into the political sphere. It's really funny, or not funny, but when you zoom out, right, the establishment wings both sides of the political aisle, admittedly much more frequently on the Republican side, they wield their connections, right, with donors, corporations, to protect their own power, and by extension, the power and the influence their donors have in our government. And it's very unsettling, and there needs to be regulation on lobbying and donations, because you really don't know, or it's really easy to see like who's actually for you and who's actually just for the big companies and keeping them in power. Because there's a lot of performative acts going on, specifically with the Democratic Party. Republicans, they know what they're about. They know who their donors are and who the corporations are funding. They know what time it is, and it's something that needs to be checked.
Unfortunately, we are witnessing today yet another political stunt, plain and simple. Republicans are here drawing a clear line in the sand. They will stop at nothing to advance Donald Trump's agenda and the dangerous blueprint laid out in Project 2025, even if it means targeting the very groups that are working to protect our communities and support our law enforcement agencies. Let's be clear, my colleagues across the aisle have shown little to no interest in working with Democrats on real solutions for the American people. Instead of addressing pressing civil rights issues constituents actually care about, like wrongful deportations of U.S. citizens, ongoing efforts to undermine voting rights, or the serious flaws in our criminal justice system, this committee is spending its time holding a hearing with a title that sounds like it was ripped from a conspiracy blog. This hearing, How Leftist Nonprofit Networks Exploit Federal Tax Dollars to Advance a Radical Agenda. Really?
Just so we're all on the same page, the so-called leftist nonprofit networks the Republicans are whining about include groups that promote DEI education, gender identity education, climate crisis awareness, and rehabilitative justice initiatives, just to name a few examples. Now, that's not to say that all of these groups are perfect. They're not susceptible to corruption and bad faith actors, and that Democrats should cozy up to even more billionaires to fund initiatives like these. But painting them all with such a broad brush is not only disingenuous, but deeply hypocritical when you look at the billions upon billions of dollars spent by right-wingers who want to fulfill their own ideological goals with much more nefarious and harmful means and ends.
This kind of rhetoric, whether directed at nonprofits, their leaders, or elected officials, is not only reckless, it is beneath the dignity of this institution. And sadly, this isn't the first time this has happened. Over the past 6 months, we've seen hearing after hearing do nothing but attack nonprofits, as well as those who are just generally on a mission to serve, protect, and uplift vulnerable communities. If my Republican colleagues are truly concerned about taxpayer dollars being misused for political agendas, I'd encourage them to take a long, hard look in the mirror.
For me, there's so much spending, so much unnecessary spending that we have in this country, specifically with this administration, like in different initiatives that they want passed and have already passed. Like, for example, they want to spend all this money, taxpayer money, to help give the rich, the wealthy, tax cuts, as if they need more money in their hands. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They could use that on the education system and revitalizing that. I'm getting choked up because of how absurd it is. But those are some things that it could be used elsewhere. How about cleaning up our environment? There's just so many ways to use this money better.
Fact. Under the Trump administration, the Department of Justice stripped hundreds of millions of dollars from the Office of Justice programs, money that funded essential community safety initiatives like victim services, gang prevention, and reentry support. Fact. Trump and Republicans slashed grants to organizations like the National Organization for Victim Assistance, which trains advocates who staff domestic violence shelters, hotlines, and rape crisis centers. Fact. They cut over $10 million in funding to the National Policing Institute, a nonprofit helping rural police departments reduce violent crime. Fact, this week, Republicans are trying to gut PEPFAR, a life-saving program that partners with nonprofits around the world and has saved more than 26 million lives. And let's not forget, many of these cuts were laid out in Project 2025, a radical far-right playbook drafted by hyper-conservative nonprofits for the express purpose of dismantling the very government institutions and systems that serve the public good. Ironically, we even have one of the authors of Project 2025 here with us today. So let's not pretend this is about nonprofit accountability, because if it were, this committee would also be investigating the Conservative Partnership Institute, which has pushed anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ+, and anti-vaccine propaganda and hosted efforts to challenge the 2020 election. Mind you, as we have these organizations that are pushing anti-vaccine propaganda, we know that measles has reached a 30-year high when measles had actually been over and done with. But now that we don't believe in vaccines, now children are our targets, unfortunately, and yes, they are dying. The New Century Foundation, a white nationalist organization that somehow maintains its 501c3 status to launder hate speech through the language of intellectual inquiry. Or they would investigate Turning Point USA, which has been linked to organizers of the January 6th insurrection. But Republicans aren't talking about those groups because this isn't about accountability. It's about silencing organizations that challenge Republican power. It's about targeting nonprofits that protect the very people this Trump-aligned movement continues to harm. These organizations are defending victims of unlawful actions. They're helping to combat global pandemics. They're supporting police departments when this very committee won't. They're working to build safer, healthier communities while Trump and his allies defund them to hand out tax breaks to billionaires. And maybe that's the real threat here. They're effective. They get people off the streets, out of prison, and into opportunity. They educate people about injustice, and that apparently scares some folks more than any so-called radical agenda. Because the only thing truly radical about these nonprofits is their belief that human beings deserve dignity, opportunity, and equal protection under the law. Values my Republican colleagues seem to have forgotten, along with love thy neighbor.
Listen, I'm a huge proponent or huge supporter of Jasmine Crockett with, a lot of the statements that she's made, right? Trying to go up against the establishment, go up against, fascism with the Trump administration and also the Republicans, and just calling out their hypocrisy, calling out, their lack of moral regard for the common man and common woman. At the end of the day, though, Republicans, they couldn't care less about improving our country or serving the people that elected them, because all they care about is holding on to power and all the benefits that comes along with it for their group, for their circle. But everybody else that's below them, whether it's the middle class or the lower class, they have no interest in protecting or ensuring that their needs and their desires are met. For Rebel HQ, I'm Chris Williamson. We'll see you next time.